Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I'm your host, Curveball, and today I am joined by Amanda Pollock. She is a book coach for food professionals and entertainers. Amanda, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be with you.
Absolutely. You got an interesting story. So why don't you just start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, just whatever you want to let people know about yourself before we get into the meat and potatoes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I'm originally from Northern California, a little town called Vacaville in between Sacramento and San Francisco. And I knew from a really early age that I wanted to be an actor. So that was kind of always a dream, just really, I think I just fell in love with stories and the multiple ways that you could tell them. And I was drawn to acting, but also I had this deep love of directing and, being in control of an entire production. I always wanted to do that. I tell people that I was an entrepreneur before I even knew what that was. And yeah, my dreams, they took me to LA a couple of times. I ended up getting into improv and sketch comedy, where I graduated from the Second City Hollywood, which the Second City is the world's largest improv and sketch comedy theater. So a lot of people from SNL, or a lot of people from Second City end up on SNL. Some of their alums have been like Tina Fey, Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara. No, Schitt's Creek just won so many Emmys, so I know a lot of people are binging that. But yeah, so kind of took a little, turn with improv and sketch comedy, and then I decided to drop all of that. It was during the Great Recession. Just a huge pivot. I think a lot of people can probably relate even now, where you're, trying to figure some things out. Maybe you lost, a bridge job, or, something that was just paying the rent, and you're trying to figure out what you're doing next. And that's what happened with me. And I decided to go to college and had a little dream to work in magazines. And that actually ended up landing me a fellowship with Time Inc., the former parent company of like Time Magazine, Food and Wine, Southern Living, and Cooking Light, where I was. So kind of a long winding road. And so much of that experience has really kind of set me up for what I'm doing now. But yeah, it's a mouthful when you put it on a resume.
So when you were acting, did you land any big roles or work with a lot of big people since you went to one of the biggest schools out there?
Yeah, so I was there actually at a really awesome time. There were a lot of people from Second City who had been either working in Chicago or New York, and they ended up teaching at the theater when I was there. So, I got to work with people who were actually working in television and film. So some of them had either been like maybe writers for The Daily Show, or any number of like Comedy Central shows. And that's kind of the fun part too, is when I would go home and I would tell people, what I was doing and who I was working with, they were like, oh, are they, how would I know them? And I'm like, you wouldn't. But they had like 2 lines on this one show, and they're probably some of the most talented people that I've ever like seen in person. And I think that's probably the thing I wasn't the most prepared for, like when I moved to LA, because I just, I thought that, oh, if you're on television and you're doing this and you're that, you're the most talented. But I think we know that life isn't really like that so much.
Absolutely. What did you do when you started working for Time Inc? What did you start off doing before you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I had a 1 year editorial fellowship at Cooking Light, and they had this program for years. So they would have people from all over the country come, and you're assigned to one of the four brands there. So it was Southern Living, Cooking Light, Coastal Living, and um, Oxmoor House, which housed all of the cookbooks for the entire company. So like if Southern Living was going to do a cookbook, Oxmoor House would handle it. And you were placed in a department, and I wanted editorial. That was really what my background was. But it was so awesome to go there because they created this fellowship. So it was like a choose your own adventure. So I was doing editorial, but I was also really encouraged that if I wanted to do video, if I wanted to experiment with that, I could uh, go into the video studio and have one of the video guys like help me film a recipe or help me film a little spot or something, just experimenting with stuff. I spent whole days in the test kitchens, and for people who don't know, like anytime you get a food magazine or you would see something in the store, all of those recipes are tested and developed in a test kitchen. So you have people who some of them have pretty like stellar culinary careers, but they end up in a test kitchen. So all day they're just tinkering with recipes and having other people test them to see if the recipes hold up or if they're even any good. And so that part of the process of just getting into every different department and seeing how a magazine is fully created was such a beneficial experience. And I know that not everyone has that experience when you're entering into a fellowship or any kind of like entry level position, but it really shaped the rest of my career because when I was there, the company's since been sold, but Time Inc. had this belief that good ideas come from everywhere. And so you were encouraged to just knock on anyone's door. So they didn't have really this hierarchy, of you're a fellow, you can't have any ideas, you can't, spearhead any projects. I was incredibly lucky to work for a company where they believed that, even the newest people could have the next great idea.
Well, let's talk about the great ideas that you got from that experience, and what great ideas are you currently working on?
Yeah. So all of that kind of, over the last 2 years, I was just trying to figure out where I belonged. I, I think that's probably the thing I've struggled with the most. Like as creative as you are, and as much as you have this rough idea of stuff that you want to do, it can be a little hard for it to materialize. And the last couple of years have been a culmination of a few things, but at the end of last year, I came across this a book coaching program, and book coaching is a relatively new endeavor or career choice. And it really comes out of the need from the publishing houses because they aren't able to develop writers how they used to. So, if you are a new writer, you would work with an editor, but it's just a very different process. You might not have the emotional support you need or the project management stuff. You're not going to have that constant touch with someone to really develop your manuscript for the most part. And so working in editorial, I really found a love for helping people develop stories and for editing. And, after I left Time Inc., I did become a content coach at a company. And, that was really helpful for me transitioning into, well, first of all, I would never call myself a coach before. So I was given that title. And then when I found this book coaching program, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in. But it melds so many things. So someone will come to me, they have an idea for a book, and it's my job to help them through the book writing process. So I'm your developmental editor, your project manager, your emotional support. And I gotta tell you, it's one of those things where I just feel like I'm at the right place at the right time. And I feel so incredibly lucky to get to work with the people I do. And it's been a long time coming, but it's nice to be in a good spot now.
So let's expand on the book coaching program. What could somebody expect who is going into a book coaching program from a writer's perspective? And what could somebody expect who wants to be a book coach from your perspective? Explain that and break that down for people.
Yeah. So the program that I was in, it was started by a woman. Her name's Jenny Nash, and she worked in publishing for years. She is also a published author, and she was doing this. She says that she really created this opportunity for a lot of people, and I 100% believe her just with her reputation. But she wanted this opportunity for people who loved publishing and were kind of in this in between thing of maybe you're not like a full editor, or you don't want to think of yourself as just an editor. It's this beautiful mix of so many things. And so she created this program of things that she saw consistently, and just helping people be able to start their business, understand what this really is, and then also start their business. And I would say even as a writer, it's probably even helpful to go through a program like that, because you really see the things that writers have problems with are pretty consistent. There's a handful of things that people will really talk about or identify. uh, I'm sure you've experienced this too, that a lot of stories sound the same, or a lot of people have the same questions about stuff. So that was really helpful for me. And even as a writer, as I was going through it, I was like, oh man, this is so many of the things I struggled with, in writing classes or whatever. And so, if you are looking for a book coaching program, either as a writer or because you're interested in that field, I would definitely, I recommend the program I went through. It's called Author Accelerator. But you really want to go into a program where someone, first of all, is realistic. The thing that really drew me to this program in particular is, they make no promises that someone will be published, or that you'll be a New York Times bestseller. They're very, very practical about what the work actually is. And so I think, especially with, so many online classes and so many opportunities to learn from people, I like to steer more towards, people who kind of give you some real talk and aren't like, you can, write a book in 30 days and then sell it, and, all of these things, because, some of this just takes a lot longer, and, managing those expectations is important.
Yeah, and also a lot of people will do that with podcasts, and they'll say, I had 30,000 downloads in 3 days and I was at the top of Apple. But that
Mhm.
might happen for some people, but that's not going to be realistic for most people. And if people go in with that expectation, they're going to be discouraged and quit because if they don't get that, like somebody else got it. So you do have to be realistic when you are doing programs like that. Did
Oh,
you
100%.
did you experiment with cooking a lot before you got into the test kitchens and all that, or you know,
Mm, that's a great question, because 100% not really. um, so growing up, I grew up like 30 minutes outside of Napa, and I did work in Napa for a while. And so, I grew up close to wine country. So food and all of these things were um, ingrained in me, and I didn't realize it so much. But when I got to Cooking Light, I was totally intimidated by the other fellows or people who worked there, because it seemed like everyone was a food blogger or had gone to culinary school or had done, whatever. And I really, the reason why I got my fellowship at Cooking Light was because I had just started writing about food in college. And that really just came out of a need of, okay, I know that I didn't know what I wanted to, what kind of magazine I wanted to work at. But I knew I needed some clips. And there was a farmer's market in Oakland where I went to school. And I was like, sure, I guess I could just write about this food. And then from there, I just realized how much I loved food stories and people who make food and food and wine and all of those things. I was really drawn to them. And so I just started writing about it. So, sometimes you can be good at something that you're not an expert in. And I wish I would have known that when I was younger, because I think you don't do so many things because you feel that you have to have, a stamp of approval from someone else. And that's not really true.
Well, what kind of projects are you working on these days? Do you have any books coming out, or do you have any talk about your previous books or any podcasts or anything like that?
I mean, right now I am in like full growth mode with my business and it's so much fun. So I'm really taking on clients it was like shortly after quarantine started. So this has been just a great time, I think, to hone in on the stuff that I really want to do. And so it's been recently too that I've had more and more people finding me. I'm also a regular columnist for the site DIY MFA, and it's a great site for writers. They have some really fantastic resources, but I have regular column there with food writing, and I've recently, been invited to do some talks and coaching for writers, and that's kind of interesting to me too, because someone told me years ago that I should be a teacher. And I was like, no. I thought they were just telling me that because I have an English degree. And you need to pay attention to what people are saying, is a gift of yours. Because the more you lean into that, I think there's so many more opportunities and people can see stuff you don't. So it's just interesting. I've had some more people reach out about, maybe teaching classes. And then, I have this thought of, should I be teaching my own classes? So I'm in this experimenting, brainstorming stuff, but, still working with taking, new clients and expanding that. But yeah, it's the growth part is just really exciting. I think just to see, plant a seed and start to see it grow can also be just a fun state to be in.
Well, you could always take your columns that you write and turn those into audio.
I mean, there's so many opportunities, right? Like I think too the thing for me is figuring out like what that thing that like sparks me, because maybe you feel me on this, because there are so many ideas. I have so many things that I'm like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And there's just not enough time in the day.
I definitely understand that. Well, since I'm a podcaster, I follow a lot of authors and writers. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of people are gonna hear this, and some of them are in different stages. So give some advice, your best advice for authors in all stages of their writing, whether they're in the beginning or whether they're a seasoned veteran.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I would say the biggest thing too is, remembering why you started. I think whether you've written, nothing or a few books, that it can be really easy to have the noise of the world come in and, cast doubt or make you think that you can't write another book like you did. Or, even if you've never written anything, there is still this self-doubt that I see with clients who, have written professionally and, know the editing process and what revisions look like. And I, feel them with the frustration. And so I always try to take people back to one of like, what are you really doing this for? Why is this the story you really want to be telling? What is it about this that like this is the moment for this? And I think that that's really helpful no matter where you are in the process, because that's what's going to drive you. It's super easy to start something, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to write this book and this is going to be the thing. And then about, you know, halfway through, or, you know, maybe even 20 pages in, you don't know what you're doing anymore, and you get frustrated and you feel like the process is just taking too long. And, you know, you need to remember why you started and not why other people are telling you that you need to do that.
Well, how can people connect with you? Throw out some contact information. There might be some writers out there that want to check out your book coaching classes.
Yeah. So you can find me at amandapollock.com. And I have a free guide over there, how to write your first 25 pages with purpose, which I wish I had when I was when I started writing. But you can get there. You'll get on my email newsletter if you sign up, and I send out weekly like free inspiration and guides and all kinds of fun goodies every Monday. And yeah, that's the best way to reach out. And you can also, if you're interested in starting your book, we can hop on a call and figure out, you know, what the best steps are. But yes, definitely reach out. amandapollock.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Pollock. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.